Hello and welcome to U.S. Nationals coverage. Murray Bartholdi in the booth, joined by Reed Duke. We are back on standard here after a morning of draft. Owen Turtenwald versus Andrew Zigas. Black-red versus black-red. Both players currently sitting at 9-2, so this is effectively an elimination match for the player who loses. Reed, though, quick start here. Soulscar Mage into Heart of Kirin.
Yeah, that's really nice. The Heart of Kirin, of course, triggering the Soulscar Mage, so an attack for 2 right off the bat, and Owen just really well set up. Whether he's got spells or creatures in his hand, he can either trigger Prowess and kill off opposing creatures, or he can produce some stuff to crew Heart of Kirin. Though you got to expect there's probably an Abrade or a Lightning Strike coming for him here.
All right, here's Pia Nalaar from Owen Turtenwald. We'll see what Andrew has to deal with. Any one of these threats, it is Lightning Strike. We're going to crew up the Heart of Kirin here and swing in for 4. Andrew Zigas down to 14.
Well played by Andrew to kill Pia in response to the trigger, because that forces the Soulscar Mage to crew and therefore not attack. Owen definitely breathing a sigh of relief that it happened to be Lightning Strike rather than Abrade, because Heart of Kirin is just so powerful here. And Andrew took an additional 4 damage right off the bat, and if Owen can crew again, his life total is just plummeting.
Goblin Chain Whirler for Andrew Zigas will take out the Thopter token from Turtenwald. Hazoret the Fervent hits the table for Owen, and in smashes a Heart of Kirin once again. Andrew Zigas down to 10.
Heart of Kirin is a little bit of a controversial card. It's a fringe slot that some red aggro players don't play. And going into the Pro Tour, Owen and I and our teammates, we were not too sure about Heart of Kirin. It was good in some spots, bad in some spots. So we were heavily debating whether we were going to play it or not, and the end of the conversation was something like, "Dude, it's 2 mana for a 4/4 flying. How can you not?"
I love it.
Like when you just really see through everything else,
yeah, and
get to the cut to the bones of the situation. It is 2 mana for a 4/4 flying. This card is insanely powerful, and I think you're missing out on something if you register a standard deck without Heart of Kirin.
Yeah, sometimes you can get a little bit caught up in the discussion, can get away from you 2 hours later. Wait a second, everybody. This is a 4/4 for 2. Okay, put it in the deck. I love that. Pia Nalaar of his own for Andrew Zigas after taking out Owen Turtenwald's. Here's an Abrade on the Thopter token from Owen.
So that Thopter token, not a huge threat, but this is just exactly what Owen needs to continue crashing in. This is going to be an attack for 6, putting Andrew dead to Heart of Kirin, dead to a Hazoret connection, dead to 2 Hazoret activations. So tough spot for the player on the draw here.
And that's got to be really important to being on the play, especially with this deck. Pia goes down here, block from the Soulscar Mage. On the Soulscar Mage. 3 mana still open for Owen, 1 card in hand.
And you see the careful sequencing there. Owen decided to crew with Hazoret, even though he could have played his land and attacked, but part of this was the surprise value, trying to goad Andrew into taking that extra 2 damage. Then Owen could have played out the 3rd land and said, you know what, you're dead to 2 activations.
All right, we're at 5 mana for Andrew Zigas, and I know he's got a Flamewake Phoenix in hand, and there it is. And we're going to throw a card at your face. With Hazoret, Andrew Zigas down to 4. 1 mana open for Andrew.
So we could very well see Owen just do nothing this turn. You have to expect the black-red deck to have no life gain and no answer to Hazoret, or at least no easy single-card answer to a Hazoret. So if Owen just leaves his creatures back, he doesn't have to deal any more combat damage to win this game. Just end of turn activate, untap, draw my card, activate again, you're done.
Not even worth it to try and crew and swing in.
No, the Flamewake Phoenix effectively just brick walls a creature for a turn. If Owen didn't draw a removal spell, then the Phoenix just gets a free block and it'll come back next turn. So no reason to, really force that issue from Owen's perspective when he just has a very clear route to victory, no matter what he draws.
Yeah, Hazoret here activated and just gets to sit back on it, pass the turn, activate, boom, you're dead. Owen Turtenwald taking down game number 1 here versus Andrew Zigas in the mirror match. black-red. Making it look easy. All right, so when you're in the situation, Reed, black-red versus black-red, does your sideboarding get tricky at all?
It is really important to note in this matchup that the dynamic changes quite a lot between Game 1 and the post-sideboarded games. Cards like Bomat Courier are coming straight out of the deck, so that means that the players are going to lose a little bit of their speed, but they're also going to lose their vulnerability to opposing Goblin Chain Whirlers, and they're going to pick up a lot of extra removal spells. So you can expect the games to slow down and be more about late game flooding out, and who can have the powerful card stick, like Rekindling Phoenix and Glorybringer, are going to become even more important than they were in Game 1. An interesting debate about this matchup is how much differently, if at all, you should sideboard based on the play and the draw.
Right.
A lot of people would tell you, okay, you want to stay aggressive when you're on the play, and then maybe become a mid-ranger control deck on the draw, board out your Scrap Heap Scroungers. For me, I think when both players are packing so many removal spells, it actually doesn't change that much who's on the play and who's on the draw, because it's so unlikely that the game is going to end with a quick rush. So I'm kind of just going to view the best cards as the best cards, and I'm not going to really overthink myself based on the play and the draw. You want to have staying power, you want to have removal, and you want to have those powerful top-end cards.
And black-red is certainly capable of having that powerful top end as well. Do these decks go bigger versus each other after sideboard?
I would say yes. The hallmark card of the matchup is Rekindling Phoenix, because this is a card that will win the game when it goes unanswered, and it virtually always demands 2 removal spells from the opponent, and a 2-for-1 in a really close, tight matchup that runs on thin margins. Sometimes that's all you need to win the game. So Rekindling Phoenix, certainly a card to look for. Another really interesting dynamic, particularly it comes up after sideboarding, is that you want to pack your deck full of these powerful cards that can win the game on their own and generate card advantage, but one of the strongest cards in Game 1 is Hazoret the Fervent. And the more you raise your mana curve, the more you make it difficult to empty your hand, the weaker Hazoret becomes. So in that sense, there could be kind of 2 schools of thought. I want to keep my deck low curve, fast, and efficient, and maximize my chance of winning when I draw Hazoret. Or I want to, not so much play to the Hazoret and just use all the general principles of an aggro mid-range mirror, which is that you want to have removal, card advantage, and powerful stuff. So there's a tension there.
Players drawing their opening hands for game number 2 here. Owen Turtenwald currently up a game over Andrew Ziggis, both playing black-red here at this tournament. Owen packing the exact same 75 he brought to the Pro Tour. I like it. Why change it when it's pretty good? And Andrew's going to be on a mulligan. Reed is happy with the 7. I have a question for you about...
I'm also happy with Owen's 7, but I think you meant to say Owen is happy with the 7.
Oh, what did I say? Did I say...
You said Reed's happy with the 7.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, you're good friends.
Yeah. I'm pleased that Owen kept 7 cards.
Look, me and Megan are often one person, so...
All right, so I'll get a free pass if I call you Megan next time.
Yeah, you've got a get out of jail free card for that. I mean, seriously though, you're currently leading. You're in the leading post to be captain of the U.S. team for the Magic World Cup. There's still a few tournaments ahead of us. Wouldn't it be so wonderful to go there? Just speculating here with Owen.
It would be really awesome. Just amazing to. Be able to represent the country with a close friend like that and somebody that you've teamed with before. There's some advantages to teaming up in a high pressure situation like that. I guess that's something that's worth touching on briefly. The 2 players who make the finals are going to make up 2/3 of the United States national team, and the 3rd player will be whoever finishes the season with the most pro points. That's not going to be decided until either the end of August or the end of September. There's a little bit of confusion there, but at any rate, I'm leading right now. But Seth Manfield is also a really, really likely candidate to take that spot, and half dozen players that could take it with a really, really strong Pro Tour finish in Pro Tour 25th anniversary.
We are underway here in game number 2. Goblin Chain Whirler on the table for Andrew. Kari Zev, Skyship Raider in play for Owen. Chain Whirler, definitely a card that has shaped our current standard format. How important is it in this mirror match?
I wouldn't say it's important. It's probably important in game 1 when the Bomat Couriers are in there and the ability to pick off a Bomat or a Pia Nalaar or finished off a weakened creature does come up. But in the sideboarded games, you know what? It's just a solid card. It demands an answer. It crews Heart of Kiran. It gets you a little value if you play it and it gets answered 1 for 1. So it's definitely a good card. You're very, very rarely sideboarding it out, but not one of the major players, not like Rekindling Phoenix is.
Abrade taking down the Goblin Chain Whirler of Andrew Zigis, enabling Owen to get in for an attack with Kari Zev and her monkey. Unlicensed Disintegration, though, is going to deal with Kari Zev, followed up, and there you go. Rekindling Phoenix, the card that could shape this matchup here for Owen Turtenwald, now in play. And
particularly brutal for Andrew to face down the Rekindling Phoenix when he doesn't have a board of his own yet, so his best answer is probably just to suck it up, spend 2 removal spells, and hope Owen doesn't have a great follow-up, because he can't really race. He can't force the Rekindling Phoenix into a blocking or a defensive position, so it hurts, but you got to do what you got to do.
And such a tough card for a black-red deck to deal with, too.
Actually, the best outcome would be to use a removal spell and untap and then play a Goblin Chain Whirler to finish off the token. And in that sense, to get back to your question from a moment ago, Chain Whirler is still quite strong, as it does count as 1/2 of an answer to Rekindling Phoenix in addition to all the other nice things it does in the matchup.
Abrade here used on the Rekindling Phoenix of Owen Turtenwald is going to leave him with that egg, and here's a Hazoret hitting the table too. Yeah, and you mentioned Chain Whirler being 1/2 of an answer, which is just part of a reason why that card is so incredibly strong. It needs essentially 2 cards to deal with it in a way. And just like you drew it up, Goblin Chain Whirler here taking out that egg.
Yeah, so Andrew Zigis really fighting the good fight. He had a nice sequence. He hit his land drop. I noticed that he has a Chandra's Defeat in his hand, so he's used his cards in the best possible way, and he's clawed back to not quite an even position because Hazoret's so strong on the opposite side of the battlefield, but he's very much in the game.
Pia Nalaar here for Owen Turtenwald, bringing along the Thopter. Life totals 18 to 17. And we've got a Chandra's Defeat, which will take care of Pia. A little off flavor there, come on. Down goes Mom.
Chandra's Defeat and Magma Spray, 2 of the hallmark sideboard cards for the matchup. Defeat, of course, being better for taking out something like Glorybringer or Chandra herself.
Right.
But Magma Spray, a little more efficient, better against Scrap Heap Scrounger, and more versatile for other matchups like Llanowar Elves decks.
Abrade here deals with the Chain Whirler from Andrew. So Hazoret and the Thopter, the only creatures in play. Until here, Owen adding his own Chain Whirler to the battlefield will ping Andrew down to 16.
And this is trouble for Andrew if Owen's able to empty his hand, which looks like he's down to 1 card, getting to attack with Hazoret. You don't get to take too many hits for 5 from Hazoret.
Hazoret and the Thopter token swinging in there. From Owen Turtenwald, Andrew Zigis down to 10. Chandra's Defeat takes down Goblin Chain Whirler at the end of the turn. I spy a Pia and a Rekindling Phoenix, one other card in Andrew's hand. He's going to spend it all for the Phoenix.
Phoenix, a nice roadblock for Hazoret. Assuming Owen has just a couple lands in hand, the Phoenix can block Hazoret every single turn. But I don't think Owen has lands in hand because he didn't make his land drop, and he magma sprayed his own creature to empty his hand. So you got to figure that one last card is either something that he was having trouble getting rid of, like an expensive card, or potentially just another removal spell.
Owen Turtenwald tapping 3. We are just going to pitch the Soulscar Mage. In comes Hazoret, in comes the Thopter.
I would guess that Soulscar Mage was the card Owen drew this turn, and he is maybe just going to finish off the Rekindling Phoenix with a removal spell if it blocks Hazoret, but it looks like it doesn't. Andrew Ziggis falls down to 3 life. Oh!
Doomfall!
One of the precious few answers to Hazoret in the matchup. Ziggis navigates to a situation where Owen has only 1 creature. Owen surely kicking himself for discarding the Soulscar Mage instead of adding it to the battlefield.
Wow, now Rekindling Phoenix owns this board here. Gets in for 4, knocks Turtenwald down to 14. Had 1 card in hand. It's another Hazoret, and there we go! Owen Turtenwald taking down this match 2-0 over Andrew Ziggis after that Doomfall. Well, a backup Hazoret is good enough to get it done.
Yeah, so Owen, he's not going to be able to take a draw in the last round, but he has pretty strong tiebreakers, so he's put himself in a position where if he wins the final round, he's got a great shot to make the top 8.
Yeah, he came into day 2 here at the tournament at X1, so like you mentioned, good tiebreakers. We'll see what happens. We've got more Magic coming up for you in just a second. Hi there, and welcome back to coverage of U.S. Nationals. Murray Bartholdi in the booth with Reed Duke. We just saw Owen Turtenwald take down a match with his black-red aggro deck. Same 75 from the Pro Tour. We've got some time walk magic for you now as well. From this round, let's head down to the feature match area. Kevin Jones versus Joe Bernal. Jeskai control for Kevin Jones, blue-black control for Joe.
Kevin Jones put up a 6-0 record in booster draft. He was only 3-1-1 in constructed on the first day. I talked to him. He was a little disappointed with his record, but since then, he has not lost. Pairing it with, I think, a 6-0 draft record at Pro Tour Dominaria too. So this seems to have found his format. See if he can keep it up in standard.
Well, that's a nice answer there to the glint sleeve siphoner.
Yeah, and boy, here you see Kevin's deck building choices really paying dividends, because Glint Sleeve Siphoner, one of the absolute scariest cards to see if you're blue-white control, because most of your answers come in the form of Settle the Wreckage, Fumigate. Those cards aren't going to be able to stop the Siphoner until sometimes it's too late, but Magma Spray just cleans it up. Kevin with his blue-red based control deck just touching into white for Teferi.
Another glint sleeve siphoner into play here for Joe. We'll see if this one can stick around. Meanwhile, Kevin Jones getting it done here with Jeskai control.
So Kevin Jones at 9-1-1. He does need to win his last two rounds to make the top 8. But the good news for him is with that draw, he won't have to battle it out for tiebreakers. He will be guaranteed his slot in the top 8 if he wins the last 2 rounds. Joe Bernal, on the other hand, 10-1 with pretty solid tiebreakers. He's would love to win this round and draw, but 1-1, he might be right in there.
Whirler Virtuoso in play for Kevin Jones. Coming along with the Thopter token, and Harness Lightning dealing with the other glint sleeve siphoner from Joe.
Another advantage of Kevin's deck is Joe has a bad draw. He's missing land drops, but if you're playing a super reactive blue-white control deck that can only win by decking the opponent, you're not necessarily able to capitalize on something like this, whereas Kevin can actually dish it out. He can give some damage back against an opponent who's got a slow or awkward draw.
That's a great point. Thopter here getting in for another point of damage, knocking Joe down to 16. Back over to Kevin. Joe cannot find that third land, unfortunately.
We saw Joe's deck on camera once on day 1, and now it might be a little confusing that it's labeled as blue-black control, but you see the siphoners. This is just very much Joe Bernal's own take on the archetype. He is pretty controlling. He's got Torrential Yearhulk, he's got Glimmer of Genius, he's got a lot of removal spells. No other cheap creatures besides the siphoners. You won't find Champion of Wits or Gifted Aetherborn here. So he is basically just a blue-black control deck with the 4 siphoners to give him a proactive early play and an edge in control mirrors. But Kevin Jones, having nothing to do with it, he's prepared with all the cheap red burn to take care of those siphoners.
And here's Teferi from Kevin Jones, the white splash. The man himself, the hero of Dominaria, is going to go ahead and tuck that Bloodfast back into Joe's deck.
And that's a way to torture a mana-screwed opponent.
Oh,
Joe,
yes.
First of all, knows that draw step coming in a few turns is not going to be a land. Also, no direct damage or haste in the blue-black deck, so he's looking at Vraska's Contempt or Bust if he wants to answer the Teferi. But falling further and further behind, missing land drops, facing down Search for Azcanta and Teferi, hero of Dominaria. And, ooh, having to say go against both those permanents, not what you want.
We're going to put a Harness Lightning into the yard, draw a land here for Kevin Jones. Tick up Teferi to 2. Draw once again another land. And, we talked about Kevin's deck choice here, too, to play Jeskai control. And we've seen some of the benefits of it this game. Magma Spray, Harness Lightning. But a lot of players just playing straight up blue-white or Esper.
Yeah, definitely. The pros and cons of Kevin's deck versus the traditional blue-white. The pros are that you have this cheap red removal, which, of course, giving you an answer to Glint Sleeve Siphoner is fantastic. But in general, you're better able to keep pace against the fast red decks, killing off those Scrap Heap Scroungers and Bomat Couriers before they really get out of hand. The cons are that Settle the Wreckage and Fumigate, as we know, are super, super powerful cards, and they're sort of reset buttons that allow you to come from behind if you do fall behind. So Kevin is much more looking to keep step with the opponent 1-for-1, whereas the blue-white deck is more looking to set up and then play one of those really powerful spells to claw back into the game. And there are good things and bad things about both strategies. But speaking more generally about matchups, I think Kevin is happier to play against the fast aggro decks and a little bit less happy to play against something like a green Steel Leaf Stompy or something like that, where Fumigate and Settle the Wreckage really shine.
Glimmer of Genius for Kevin Jones is going to be met by Supreme Will, but we're not countering anything. We're trying to find some cards.
Yeah, Joe, fighting the good fight here. He's digging for Vraska's Contempt to try to answer the Teferi, but I think, Kevin basically has this game all but locked up between Teferi unanswered, Search for Azcanta unanswered, Resolved Glimmer of Genius, full hand, more lands in play. It's just too tough for Joe to come back from this.
Kevin Jones untaps lands, end of turn, full grip, as you said. Back over to Joe. If he has a Vraska's Contempt, well, it's not going to resolve, so never mind. 5 mana taps here, the Scarab God.
Any number of possible answers Kevin could have for this, including just doing nothing, untapping, and putting it back in Joe's deck with Teferi.
Syncopate. And Joe Bernal has seen quite enough, thank you very much. Scoops him up. Game 1 goes to Kevin Jones and his Jeskai control deck. Here we go, game number 2. Joe Bernal on blue-black control, kind of his own unique build, as Reed talked about, where we are playing Glint Sleeve Siphoners.
I actually love to see this matchup, Maria, because everyone knew going to the tournament that blue-white control was one of the top decks in the format, and people are going to beat it. Here you see Joe with the Siphoners and a blue-black base control deck, all those powerful black anti-control cards in the sideboard. Looks like he was really respecting that matchup and well prepared to beat blue-white, but here Kevin almost, one step ahead with the efficient answers to the Siphoner, his own take on control, one that Joe wasn't necessarily as prepared to prey on.
But I think
Nothing hitting the board just yet. 3 lands in play. Make that 4 for Joe Bernal.
I am happy to see a better draw from Joe Bernal this time, so we're going to settle into a slow, fair control mirror where these players are going to have to navigate and employ all those traditional techniques that players need to win control mirrors.
Okay, we're just going to draw and pass the turn. Draw and pass the turn has been the name of the game. We got a cycle there for Joe Bernal.
Yep, generally when you would expect both players to have counter spells, it can put you at a severe disadvantage if you're the first one to make a move, because imagine Joe taps out for the Scarab God. Kevin can then go disallow, untap, resolve his own Teferi uncontested. So in that sense, control mirrors generally start out as this sort of waiting game where no one wants to tap mana on their own main phase. Kevin resolving Glimmer of Genius puts him in a pretty nice position, up on a card and able to dig towards whatever he needs, be it land drops or counter spells or a threat for later.
Glimmer of Genius, just a really nice card, too, to play at the end of a turn.
For sure, yeah. The fact that you get to spend your mana and advance your game plan without actually putting yourself at risk makes Glimmer of Genius one of the most important cards in the matchup.
All right, let's see what happens here. Whirler Virtuoso on the stack for Kevin Jones.
And this is just sort of a nothing exchange. You saw before Kevin cast that he fanned out the cards in his hand. He had 8 after resolving Glimmer of Genius. So instead of discarding to hand size, he just plays out the Whirler Virtuoso, which a modest 1-for-1 trade is all Kevin was asking for there, so he didn't have to discard.
So when do you make the decision to go for it here?
Well, a couple things can happen. One is if a player starts missing land drops, that puts them at a disadvantage. So you see Kevin, no land drop, discard to hand size, hemorrhaging resources by discarding to hand size, and also falling behind in the mana battle, which can be pretty important in the when you set up for those big counterspell battles.
Torrential Gearhulk met with another Torrential Gearhulk. Wow. Joe Bernal comes out on top in that exchange.
However, he had to tap a lot of his mana on his own
true.
turn to fight that battle, so this is a window for Kevin to maybe do something, but he is definitely shackled by the fact that he doesn't have as much mana as Joe. If he had 7 or 8 lands, he could go Teferi, back it up with a counterspell, but instead he's going to have to settle for a more modest play, or just cross his fingers that something resolves.
Okay, so he's going the more modest route here, Glimmer of Genius. Just too dangerous out there for a Teferi with 2 up from Joe. Let's take a look.
Yeah, another thing about the Teferi is the -3 ability, not so great against Torrential Gearhulk, because it means your opponent will redraw it and be able to re-trigger that super, super powerful enters the battlefield ability.
Even if they don't have anything good to flash back from the graveyard right now?
Right now, but you better expect that something's going to happen in the few turns. These decks are both packed with powerful instants, anything from counterspells to Glimmer of Genius to Vraska's Contempt. So the Torrential Gearhulk, trust me that Joe will find a way to get some value out of it.
Teach me the ways of control. I'm just like, yeah, bounce it, put it back in. Nothing in the graveyard of value. We're ahead. Gearhulk here getting in the red zone. Attacking Kevin Jones. And here's a Scarab God. No can do Jace's defeat from
That's
Kevin
Jones. That's a
Jones.
nice one.
We saw Chandra's defeat last match. Here's Jace's defeat.
Yeah, Jace's defeat is perfect in a world where you want to have efficient counterspells to win fights over disallow and stuff like that, but also in a world where Torrential Gearhulk and the Scarab God are 2 of the most important cards for some builds of control. Jace's defeat, just super well-rounded sideboard card for this type of matchup.
Here's a duress from Joe. Take a look at Kevin's hand. We've got a couple of Teferis, 3 disallows.
Speaking of sideboard cards,
Yeah.
Kevin was ready for Joe's anti-control tech in the main deck, Glint-Sleeve Siphoner being answered by the cheap red burn, but when Duress and Argyll's Bloodfast come in off the sideboard, that's something that's going to be good against absolutely any control deck, Kevin Jones's Jeskai deck included.
And duress here, kind of seems like it's extra valuable when you get to see those 3 disallows in Kevin Jones's hand.
Wow, Maria, he's actually doing it. He's putting the Gearhulk back, and he's just really crossing his fingers that those disallows are going to be enough to stop it.
Teferi down to 1. Have a good night's sleep, Gearhulk. You're tucked away for the night. Glimmer of Genius here from Joe.
So the fact that Joe's doing it on his own main phase indicates to me that he has something else that he wants to resolve even more than this Glimmer of Genius.
Looks like we're going bottom on this scry.
Well, we know that one of them is the Gearhulk, so
That's true.
This is fascinating. And you saw him, with the little shuffling of the 2 cards, so it's pretty important that Kevin not know which of these scry cards is the Torrential Gearhulk if one or both of them wind up being on top.
And the match, it could go very long, and it could matter which order you put those 2 in on the bottom. All right, so he did bottom both of them.
So it is definitely the case that one of them was the Gearhulk, right? Because Gearhulk went 3rd from the top, he drew a card, and then the Glimmer looked at the next 2. So he should have been looking at and scrying to the bottom of that Gearhulk. Interesting decision. Maybe he just really feels like he needs a specific pair of cards to cast this turn, like a Duress and a Vraska's Contempt, something like that. But man, Kevin has navigated to a winning position here with the Teferi in play. 3 disallows. He's not going to pull the trigger on anything short of crucial. He didn't counter the Glimmer of Genius. And now the shields are up.
Teferi plus finds an island for Kevin Jones. Passes back. All of his mana available. Nothing at the end of turn there from Joe. Re-entering a little bit of a draw go, and here is a Glimmer.
Yeah, this is during Kevin's upkeep. So Joe made his land drop past the turn, and he's going to force Kevin, if Kevin wants to fight, to do it on his own turn, so his mana's tied up a little bit.
So why does Kevin choose to disallow there?
Well, you just figure that Glimmer of Genius with the scry and the draw 2 could potentially find Joe Bernal 2 must-counter cards, especially when his deck is packed full of his own counterspells and duresses and Vraska's Contempts. So Kevin just wants to deprive Joe of the ability to see more cards and the ability to get up on resources.
It seems that the later the game goes, the more likely the Glimmer is to be countered.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. The countering or not countering of Glimmer can also depend on mana efficiency and exactly what stands to happen if you tap your mana. So we saw Kevin not counter it on the turn that he had only 3 mana available, and that's because he really wanted to protect his Teferi. He said, okay, if Joe wants to spend his mana setting up his hand, that's fine because it increases my chances of untapping with Planeswalker. But then once Kevin has all his mana available to him, he's able to more line up the cards the way that he feels is best, most convenient for him, and he decides to counter it in that case.
Whirler Virtuoso sticks here for Kevin Jones. Supreme will Impulse for Joe Bernal. 8 energy at the ready for Kevin as well. Duress. We'll see if Kevin will allow Joe to take a look at his hand.
Or whether he'll disallow.
And Joe knows that Kevin had 3 disallows in hand. Used one of them to counter a Glimmer. So he's got 2 left, now 1. And there's Doomfall.
So Joe just really fighting through these counter spells. He wants to deplete Kevin of counters and then have something to answer the Teferi.
Kevin will Glimmer in response to this Doomfall. Likes them both. All right, it's going to be another Precious Disallow here on Doomfall. And there's Vraska's Contempt to take down Teferi.
Okay, so Joe Bernal able to stabilize the battlefield a little bit, but has the damage been done? Kevin got to draw 3 extra cards off that Teferi.
Whirler Virtuoso, 3 Thopters in play for Kevin Jones as well. And there is another Teferi, and Joe just has to say sure. Search. And here we go. We're actually attacking. That's right. Control deck. You can do it. In comes Whirler Virtuoso. 3 Thopter tokens. Back over to Joe. And you know what? Putting that Gear Hulk on the bottom kind of was a turning point in this whole game.
Yeah, it worked out really well for Kevin. He set it up nicely to untap with Teferi and have disallows available to protect it, and he was really rewarded for setting that up nicely.
Another Vraska's Contempt here aimed at this Teferi. We've got a Syncopate here from Kevin. And there is the handshake. Kevin Jones taking down that match versus Joe Bernal 2-0. So Kevin Jones putting himself in excellent position going into our last round of Standard.
Yeah, in fact, you know, both the players that we just saw could be in a spot where they're 1 win away from the top 8. Joe Bernal had a loss to give, probably. But Kevin Jones continuing on his march, at least 7 wins in a row here, and if he wins the next round, we can count on him being in the top 8 no matter what the tiebreakers say.
Yeah, so we are getting down to the wire here. We have 1 more round of Standard to go, and then it'll be our cut to the top 8 here. Remember, the top 2 finishers earn spots on the team to go to the World Magic Cup, or the Magic World Cup, in Barcelona later this year. Reed was on the team last year and has the potential to be on again this year, but we're happy to have you here in the booth helping us out and giving us kind of that perspective of what this tournament means for everybody too. the prize on the line. It's a pretty big one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, covering Nationals has been a real treat both of these years. I love that it's a really fun event that people are excited about, national pride on the line. I love that it's split format, so we get to challenge our players in different ways and keep it fun for the viewers over the course of the weekend. But either way, one round to go before we decide our top 8.
All right, we've got more Magic coming up here. Another time walk, Brian Braun-Duin versus John Wells. John Wells on mono red, BBD on white-blue control. We saw Brian Braun-Duin playing this deck yesterday. The uniqueness of his build is that there is no way to do damage to the opponents in the main deck, not even a Gideon.
Who needs it?
Who needs it when you've got it to Teferi?
So in our previous time walk match, we saw blue-black control and Jeskai control, essentially blue-red control. Now we have yet a third take, Brian Braun-Duin, the more traditional, established archetype, white-blue control for Teferi, Hero of Dominaria as his win conditions, leading on Settle the Wreckage and Fumigate to defend himself. But I would say not the matchup he wanted to face, at least not in game 1. Mono-red being a little even faster than the black-red decks, tough to keep pace with. Sometimes you don't even really get to survive to cast your Fumigates.
Seal Away is going to deal with an Earthshaker Kenra from John Wells. And we've Artifact Destruction to take care of that Foamhat Couriers too. On-Crop Crasher, though, will crash in here. 4-3. Knock BBD down to 15. Both of these players, by the way, record on 9-2. Can't lose if they want to keep their top 8 dreams alive. Memorial to Genius to play here for Brian. Another Earthshaker Kenra for John. Another Hasty 2 damage, in for 5. Yeah, sometimes this mono-red deck can just get off to too blazingly fast of a start for white-blue control to deal with.
Pretty bad turn for Brian there. He's only able to spend his mana on cycling a card while taking a big chunk out of his life total. He really needs to have Fumigate or Settle the Wreckage. Okay, so he's right back in it with that Fumigate.
All right, Fumigate dealing with 3 of John's creatures will help buffer Brian's life total a little bit and deal with the board from John Wells. Goblin Chain Whirler here will ping Brian. Have a 3-3 for 3. Centaur Courser here in play for John as the first strike. Not relevant when you have no creatures to face off against. And Settle the Wreckage on the single Goblin Chain Whirler here from Brian.
Brian's really valuing his life total there and also valuing a spot to use his mana more efficiently.
We have 2 cards left in hand for John. One of them is a land. And he's just going to pass the turn. Is this kind of like game over already here?
Well, the one saving grace for John is that he has Earthshaker Kenra in his graveyard, so Brian can expect that to come at him this turn. And we've actually seen a really similar game from Brian Braun-Duin where he defended himself really effectively, but then just sort of sputtered out. He didn't have a Teferi, didn't have a pull from Tomorrow. But here with Search for Azcanta and the Memorial to Genius in play, I think he's going to be able to find something. And if John Wells doesn't have a really big turn next turn, potentially Hazoret or Chandra, then Brian will be able to take control of the game and lock it up.
Cast Out dealing with the attempt to bring back the Earthshaker Kenra from John Wells. Here's one from hand. Settle the Wreckage from Brian.
A good sequence from Brian. This would have been one of the more problematic cards to deal with because even if he counters the front side, he has to worry about Eternalize next turn. And actually, John Wells shocks his own creature in response, which I like the play. He needs to stick a threat if he's going to win this game. Doesn't care about the extra land.
And Brian's got to crack the Memorial here. 2 land up. Lightning Strike going straight to the dome. BBD down to 9.
So it could be down to 5 here if the Kenra connects.
All right, so here comes Kenra. Swings in.
Close game.
Wow.
So Brian has a lot of mana. He's going to hope to find an answer to the Earthshaker Kenra. Transform, search for his Kanta. So if he's able to have a couple of turns of activating that, he'll win the game. But the window is open. If John Wells can make a big play this turn, he can still win.
I had felt like all hope had escaped John Wells, but
I really liked his play of shocking his own Kenra.
Yeah. There's a Teferi that Brian's found.
Sadly, his only land enters the battlefield tapped. This was a main phase activation of Azcanta. That's sometimes a little bit of a desperation move. Maybe no answer to the Kenra, which would allow him, leave him at 1 life against the mono red deck. Any haste creature, any burn spell.
Okay, he's going down to 1. There's Kari Zev. And that's an Essence Scatter. And there's Soulscar Mage. Okay. What can Brian Braun-Duin find?
Fumigate or Settle the Wreckage are the best ones. He already has a cast out, which means he can answer one of these creatures, but he needs to answer both.
Cast out going to use 4 mana too.
Maybe Teferi buries the Soulscar Mage, cast out hits the Earthshaker Kenra. That is one option available to him. If he has an untapped land. Which he does, he has Field of Ruins.
Okay. Brian Braun-Duin not dead yet.
So, facing this situation, he can also activate Azcanta. He has a really good chance of finding something. But for me, if I'm not certain, I'm going to make the play that beats the board guaranteed without having to get lucky off the top of my library. I would just, make the play that I mentioned, minus the Teferi, cast the cast out, and just hope to fade 1 turn of John Wells not drawing a haste creature or a burn spell.
All right, so Teferi tucks the Soulscar Mage. Kenra gets cast out. Oh, Goblin Chain Whirler to deal the last point of damage here. John Wells just scraping by there in that game.
Oh, man, poor BBD, so close in so many ways, but John Wells navigated well and played 2 outs and found it at the last turn.
Here we go, game number 2. Bomat Courier kicking things off here for John Wells. Up a game over Brian Braun-Duin's white-blue control.
And BBD actually eschewing the what I believe to be the best card in this matchup, best sideboard card for this matchup, Authority of the Consuls. You won't find that anywhere in his 75. And that could be either that, he has a different opinion on the card than I do, or Authority of the Consuls is not that effective against black-red, even though it is really strong against mono-red. So if he just expected black-red to be the more popular version of this deck, he could have made the judgment call to not include it.
Bomat Courier continuing to bring the beats here in game number 2, cast out on the cycle for Brian. Shock to the face as well. Yeah, this Bomat Courier definitely going to be able to deliver quite a lot of mail here potentially. 4 cards under it. Syncopate to deal with Chandra. But that Bomat Courier vulnerable now. But BBD is just going to pass the turn back at 14 life versus mono red. In comes the Courier one more time. And do you just leave these shocks in because you just need to deal more direct damage?
Shock is pretty bad. I would try to sideboard it out, but it's not the end of the world if you leave it, especially if you think you can force your opponent to the play pattern of casting Teferi and minusing. Then Shock can be pretty effective. It's also good if your opponent makes the judgment call to bring in History of Benalia, but we talked about it yesterday, and I don't really think Brian is going to bring in History of Benalia in this matchup, although he certainly could.
Essenscatter deals with Hazaret, so two big threats effectively met by Brian Braun doing Chandra and Hazaret. Here's another Chandra from John Wells. Disallow. Bomat Courier getting in again.
This is one of those games, Maria, where Brian's able to answer everything, answer one threat per turn, every single turn, but just that one Bomat Courier that slipped in underneath permission keeps attacking, keeps burying cards, putting John in a position to actually win the long game, despite his deck normally being an early game aggro deck. If he gets to draw 7, 8 extra cards, I mean, what can Brian really do to compete with that?
This is something that red decks are not supposed to have access to.
It's true.
Bomat Courier flipping the script. Has been for a while now. Hazaret here for John. Brian Braun doing, hey, I thought I was supposed to be the one with card advantage.
Brian has Disallow, but chooses not to counter the Hazaret. He's really holding on to it to try to counter the Bomat Courier activation.
Ooh, that'll be nice. Down to 11, pull from tomorrow here for Brian.
Yeah, pull for 4. A good way to spend 6 mana, but it's no Bomat Courier. It's only 4 cards.
I mean, the new Sphinx's rep. This will be interesting to see how this decision plays out for Brian too, choosing to hold on to that disallow for the Courier activation. Seven cards in hand, make that 6 for Brian. Tapping 3 here for Gideon. All right, Gideon came in out of the board. We're going to plus on Hazaret. Prevent that damage. He's kept 4 mana open here as we head back over to John Wells' turn. By the way, John Wells has Fight with Fire in hand.
Yeah, that's actually a bit awkward. You think of that as a reactive or a super late game card, but he's going to have to lose it at any point if he decides to crack this Bomat Courier.
That's true. On Crop Crasher, says John? Question mark?
I bet I can go a little bit.
Bomat Courier number 2. Both good.
I would attack with everything. I mean, if Settle the Wreckage is the best Brian can come up with, then you at least get to crack your Bomat Courier.
Just the On-Crop Crasher and the Bomat Courier in at Gideon. Seal Away deals with the On-Crop Crasher. Gideon drops down to 3 after the hit with the second Courier.
Man, and John Wells might come to regret not using his opportunity to crack the Bomat Courier while he can. It's hard for me to imagine him losing with a hand full of 7 fresh cards. But now with the shields up, the disallow, Brian really only has to manage what John has on the board while holding up 3 mana, and
just wait for him to be out.
Wells is kind of stuck.
Chain Whirler here from Wells, hitting the stack.
But yeah, he played around Settle the Wreckage last turn, but imagine you attack with the 3 creatures, Brian taps out for Settle, you get to draw, 6 or 7
Something
cards
like
under the Bomat Courier and get 2 additional lands to work with. That's going to set you up for some powerful stuff down the road.
Chain Whirler is good, pings Brian down to 10. Very hesitant with the attack here. Understandably so. Look like he's saying, I'm attacking you.
Yeah, so his logic must be, it doesn't really matter if I get the Gideon down to 1 loyalty. I'm just going to wait until I have a creature that can actually kill him in one shot instead of sending the chip damage at Gideon and wasting a bunch of attacks.
Seal away.
Target the big Bomat Courier, so here's the moment.
All right, here we go. Crack the courier.
So discard your hand, that's part of the cost. Double Fight with Fire.
Disallow.
Okay, so those cards are going to stay in exile permanently. There's also the Bomat triggers still on the stack.
Yep, there we go. So Brian will take 1 in that exchange. The second card tucked under Bomat Courier number 2 falls down to 9.
This is a great game.
Yeah. And now John Wells, no cards in hand.
Often games of this matchup are relatively one-sided. Either the mono red player runs over the control player and it's over quickly, or the control player stabilizes at a high life total and wraps it up. But both these games have been super close. This one in particular, a lot of decisions for both players, and I'm impressed with the way Brian's able to navigate and keep John Wells from refilling his hand with Bomat Courier, and now he's not quite stable, but getting there.
We're working on it. Earthshaker Kenra was the draw and the play for John Wells this turn. Gideon at 4. Seal away on the Earthshaker Kenra. We'll deal with that. So we were in for 1 that turn. Back over to Brian, whose life total is at 8. Gideon, just such a hard card to fight through for red.
City's Blessing.
Tick up on Gideon, targeting the Chain Whirler again, and there's another Earthshaker Kenra for John Wells. Response here from Brian. Potentially. We're going to Glimmer. Teferi was one of the cards found on this scry. Does he want it?
Once again, Julian Palermo is requesting at stage.
All right, Brian Braun falling down to 5 there. Another attack from the Kenra and the Bomat Courier as we speed things up here, heading into our final round of Swiss. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Plus, let's draw a card. Untap a couple of lands, plus Gideon again, once again on the Chain Whirler, in with the Kenra, in with the Courier. Brian Braun is at 2.
And you see him not activating the Arch of Orazca despite having 6 mana, because he doesn't want John Wells to pick up the cards from the Bomat Courier and then win via a burn spell. And here comes Gideon Emblem, which is
all right.
Which is a nice play once he has navigated his Planeswalker up to 6 loyalty.
So BBD cannot lose the game while that Gideon Planeswalker is in play. Handy. And we can start swinging in. All right, Gideon turning into a creature, hitting for 4. John Wells down to 16, and there's Torrential Gearhulk. And it looks like Brian Braun has been able to spin this game around at kind of the last second.
Yeah, very impressive stuff from BBD. He was behind the whole game, just barely hung on. The Gideon, little by little, helped him stabilize, turn things around. He disallowed the Bomat Courier triggers at the crucial moments, and here we go to game 3.
All right, things are all tied up. Mono red versus white-blue control. That was awesome to watch that game play out. Kicking things off with an Earthshaker Kenra for John Wells here, in for 2. Brian down to 18. Seal away, dealing with the Kenra here. Soul Scar Mage for John Wells, and Seal away just Do you think this deck functions if it doesn't have access to a card like that?
No, it definitely needs a card like that. And before Seal Away was printed, the options were somewhat poor.
Ether Meltdown?
Yeah, Ether Meltdown is okay. You know, sometimes you see these decks playing both, and indeed Brian does have one Ether Meltdown in the sideboard. But Seal Away is better. We talked about a card like Glint Sleeve Siphoner, where sometimes you just really needed to get it off the battlefield.
Hazoret hits the table for John Wells. Chandra, here's Chandra on the stack.
Oh no,
She's good?
Bad stuff for Brian.
And a lightning strike. Oh boy. Soul Scar Mage swinging in here. Prowess trigger. End of turn. Blink of an eye.
It's actually during combat, I believe.
During combat. Okay, well that would make a lot more sense. Yeah, we're just going to replay it, but we get to draw a card there for Brian.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that for Brian. I would have expected him to use Blink of an Eye on one of the more expensive cards, like the Chandra.
Tap 5 here for John. It's Glorybringer. Attack in. What does Brian Braun-Duin have? We have a Settle. There it is. Settle the Wreckage.
Yep, so that's the best Brian could have hoped for, but he's still facing down the two most threatening permanents Ronald Red has access to, Chandra, Torch of Defiance, and Hazoret the Fervent.
And how bad is it for him if Chandra sticks around?
Very bad. He has a couple of cast outs, the only direct answers to it in his deck, and it provides, you know, long run advantage, deals damage to Brian without having to put creatures into combat, and the combination of Chandra and Hazoret in particular is just gonna plummet Brian's life total.
Brian Braun-Duin plays a land, passes the turn back over to John Wells. I'm like sitting here wondering if he had access to that disallow when the Chandra came down. Instead, we blink of an eye the Soul Scar Mage.
Yeah, that was a weird play, blinking the Soul Scar Mage. If he had blinked the Chandra, then John Wells would have had to choose between recasting Chandra or casting Glorybringer. And if you're not casting the Glorybringer, then are you studying the Hazoret maybe to be met with Settle the Wreckage? The game would have been a bit different. Brian, of course, would have had two fewer points of life, but might have been a worthwhile exchange to make.
Chain Whirler added to the party here for John Wells. On-crop Crasher as well.
Feel free to take a moment to look at standings. And then
Disallow will take care of the Crasher.
we will begin round 13 in 3 minutes.
Chandra ticks up to 7. Turn goes back over to Brian Braun-Duin. We're going to cycle a sensor. Not sure if the cards are coming together for Brian this game.
The one thing that's certain is he cannot let that Chandra emblem. He needs to have either, yeah, this works, Blink of an Eye, Disallow, or Cast Out.
All right, so Blink will be a temporary measure to deal with this Chandra here. Resetting it essentially, comes back in.
75 and 76. Please report to the feature match area.
Hazoret activation from John Wells. Swings in. Hazoret, Goblin Chain Whirler. And there is the handshake. John Wells able to defeat Brian Braun-Duin with mono red versus white-blue control. Wow. It's kind of the battle of the ages there. Mono red versus kind of a very pure control deck. More Magic coming up for you. It's our last round of Swiss on the way from U.S. Nationals. Don't go anywhere.